You are looking at is the Venice Marina, which is nearby the town of Venice, Louisiana. It's about the most southeast point you can get in the entire state of Louisiana. And to give you a little bit more information, about 100 miles from here is where you can start seeing the first signs of the oil from that catastrophic BP oil spill. And then about 20 miles out from here is where you can see the booms to make sure that the oil doesn't come this way, especially in a marina like this one where there are a lot of people who live and work here. And then also, those people have been saying that they've been seeing a little bit of the oil come this way anyway. Let me go ahead and take off this mask at this point, and I'm going to go ahead and explain why we put a mask there in a couple of seconds. But first, let me tell you, you've heard plenty of stories about the environmental catastrophe that this oil spill is. You've heard about and probably watched the political drama that's played out in Washington as a result of this spill. And then, of course, you've probably heard plenty of times about the economic ramifications of this spill, too. What you haven't necessarily heard about is the public health concerns that are starting to surface, especially with the people who live and work along the coast. For example, a man like Eric here, who I believe is installing a satellite. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, you said something very interesting, that when you first started working around here, you started getting sick. Can you tell us about that a little bit more?
I'm originally out of Baton Rouge, so when I'd come down here, it's my first time down here, I'd heard about the smell. When I got down here, I didn't notice the smell too bad, but I just started getting this headache. And I was talking to one of the EPA guys, and he said that a lot of people down here are getting them. He said he's had a headache for 2 weeks since he's been down here.
Now, that's the reason why a mask like this might be a good idea for the people who live and work in this area, the Gulf area. People like Eric we just spoke with. Let me get rid of this mask real quickly. The big concern now is for things that might be contaminating the air. The contaminants like hydrogen sulfide. According to the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, they allow about 5 to 10 parts per billion of hydrogen sulfide in the air on any given day. But according to the measurement of different environmental and public health groups, there is much more hydrogen sulfide in the air than what is allowed on various days, and this is causing a bit of concern. The other group of chemicals that is of concern for these different public health and environmental groups is a group of chemicals called volatile organic compounds, or VOCs, like benzene and methyl chloride. According to the state of Louisiana, they allow about 4 parts per billion of benzene in the air, and they allow about 60 parts per billion of methyl chloride in the air. But you can see, once again, on various dates, you can see much more VOCs in the air than what is allowed by the state of Louisiana standards.
The surprise for me was when we actually got calls from New Orleans and then from Hammond, which is the North Shore. I personally was very surprised to have air quality calls come all the way up, to New Orleans.
So where are these contaminants coming from? Well, they're coming from either the oil itself, the burning of the oil to help clean it up, or the dispersants that are being used to kind of capture the oil as well. With each cause, there is a laundry list of symptoms somebody might be suffering through as a result. For example, this right here is the laundry list of symptoms, short-term symptoms somebody might go through as a result of the oil. Or, for example, this right here is the laundry list of short-term symptoms somebody might go through from the dispersants. This list includes things like headaches, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, abdominal pains, dizziness. But the concern public health officials, public health experts, and environmental groups have isn't just the short-term effects, it's also the long-term effects.
You can have cardiac issues, you can have neurotoxic issues, cardiac arrhythmia is one of the things that can happen to you. The birth defects issue affects your reproductive organs.
Now, we have to stress the numbers we showed you earlier about the contaminant levels are from the different environmental groups, and that the numbers from the EPA are different from the ones from the environmental groups. So as they are discussing what the actual numbers are for the level of contamination here along the Gulf Coast, it might be a good idea to wear one of these. Cedric Moon, RT, Louisiana.
And Cedric's here in the studio with me to talk more about this. So Cedric, the first question I have is, you mentioned right at the end of your story there that the EPA and other environmental watchdog groups kind of have different estimates as to the air contaminants in the air. Why do you think that is? Is this maybe an indication that the EPA is trying to downplay possibly the contaminants that are down there?
That's an excellent question, Priya. Actually, if you ask the environmental groups, they'll say yes. They'll say, look, the EPA, what they're trying to do is they're trying to make sure that the numbers aren't so big that it, first of all, alarms people, and secondly, who knows what other reasons why they're trying to downgrade the numbers. The EPA will probably tell you a different story, saying, oh, no, not at all. These are the accurate readings, and we really haven't maybe devoted as many resources to finding what the air quality is like out there. So that's why there's a discrepancy. In many cases, the numbers from the EPA, from what we've heard, the few times we've heard about the numbers, are a lot lower than the numbers that these environmental groups are providing. So that's why, as of now, there is a question of, well, what are these numbers? We need to find the accurate numbers to see what people are really breathing in and how sick they could potentially be.
And another thing that struck me in your story was the woman from the watchdog group who was saying that she received calls all the way from Hammond and New Orleans, places that aren't on the coast. Right. What were these callers telling her? I don't know if you got a chance to talk to her about that, but I mean, is this something that's noticeable? Like you walk outside and you're seeing the air contaminants floating around or something? I mean, what were people specifically complaining about? Well,
no, you can't, as far as I know, see what's inside the air. Otherwise, everybody would be running for the hills or at least back into their houses. But what people were calling about were all sorts of different types of illnesses, whether it's nausea, headache, upset stomachs, or we're talking about dizziness or whatever. So that's what they're calling about, all sorts of different calls. But the interesting thing was that these symptoms that were being described by calls from all over the state of Louisiana and probably in other states as well that hug the coast is that they seem to be very similar to the symptoms that were complained about by people who volunteered to clean up the Exxon Valdez spill. And then also there are even some indications that they're similar to the symptoms complained about by people who helped clean up after the 9/11 attacks.
Wow, wow, very interesting. Well, we'll have to see what kind of repercussions that has for the people down there. That's Cedric Moon.